All right, I'm excited to welcome Sachin Lad, the Chief Technology Officer at Zight. Sachin has a very impressive career that spans leadership roles as VP of Engineering at Axiomed and Bank of America, manager at Citrix GoToMeeting, as well as a principal software engineer at Sonos. He's also a startup advisor. Beyond his awesome professional achievements, Sachin's also a family man living in Santa Barbara with his wife, kids, a doggo. He's a cricket fan, an amateur beach volleyball player, and occasional youth sports coach. Welcome, Sachin. Great to have you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, let's just dive right in. I have some questions that I would love to know kind of on the beginnings and the origins of your career. So you've been in and around tech professionally for the last 15 plus years. What got you started? What was the young Sachin doing that led you to now?
Yeah, so I had a very humble beginning. I grew up in like lower middle class family back in India, and I've been always like fascinated with like radios and telephones and television, like just seeing how you can like see all these different shows which are recorded somewhere else, and then you are able to see it on on a TV in your living room at at some other time. And same with like telephone as well, like being able to hear somebody who is in a different part of the world. And growing up, we like my brother and myself even opened a few gadgets and tried to understand what's inside of that, what are the inner workings. um, and as we kind of grew up, some of my friends, they moved to different city for their education, and we kind of kept in touch using like emails and IMs. And it was so fascinating to kind of know the internet, and how you can like do communication with somebody who is on a different part of the world. And that was like so fascinating that exposed me to like Yahoo and Geosite and whole um, World Wide Web. And it was just fascinating to learn all these things exist. And there's so much happening with computers around us, though still in like very nascent phase. And that kind of led me to kind of pursue computer science in my engineering curriculum. And as I came to know more about computers and programming, it was like more and more um, intriguing to know what else can we do using computers and internet. And soon I started kind of learning about like gaming and all these cool things that you can play with your friends who are sitting in a different city, and you can like work together and you know play all these crazy games. And then yeah, as kind of went into computer science curriculum, learning about programming and all these different languages. It was, yeah, crazy learning all these things as growing up. And as I was doing like my bachelor's, we went into computer science labs. And it was so crazy to learn that even being in computer science, we only had like few hours a week that we can spend in front of computers. So me and my friends would basically handwrite the computer programs on a notebook so that we can efficiently use our time in front of computer when we got that time in the lab. And I don't know if you have tried writing computer programs on a notebook. It's incredibly hard to do that. So yeah, all sorts of yeah, funny experiences writing computer programs on a notebook and then trying to kind of see how that works.
I fortunately, maybe unfortunately, fortunately, have not had the experience of having to write computer code. um, that's super interesting. So I also know that you mentioned that in your background, at least, in addition to computer science and playing volleyball for fun, and I know that you love cricket. What was it like going to see maybe like your first American football game? How did it compare to your experience with some of these other sports?
Yeah, so growing up, I basically learned cricket, which was pretty usual back in India. Cricket was a big thing. Everyone would, play cricket. All the kids will get together in the neighborhood and they'll, play cricket after school. And then that was, the sport that, I played in India. And then I came to US to pursue my master's and then got exposed to basically volleyball. We had a good volleyball group at University of Alabama. That's where I pursued my master's. And obviously, American football is a religion in Alabama. So, you got like very cheap tickets to, go see football games. And every Friday there would be like caravans coming into the town. They'll be parked in the quad, and it was always about football, right? So whole fall was just football, right? And once you kind of go to a few games, you kind of start to get a feel of it, and there is no escape.
Yeah, that sounds about right, especially in a big football town. Is there, going back to your point about taking apart devices, is there like an early device that, whenever you look back to a young Sacha and you were like, man, that one thing was so cool and just got me inspired, excited?
Yeah, I would say that would be radio. So back in those days, like the big radio boxes, we opened a couple of them once they were like, not working to understand what's in there. And I was just surprised, like, it's like all this, wiring and, the gadgets which make up a radio and just having all this, audio coming through it. It's just surprising to see, it's just simple box with some electronic parts in there.
Yep, I've done a bit of the same. I'm always surprised and a little overwhelmed by what I find, especially when I don't know much about the device. So you've had, as I mentioned in your intro, you've worked at some really great businesses, both large and small. I would be kind of curious, like what was your first, tech experience, your first job, like right after you finished your master's, and how was it, and what ultimately did you find exciting, and then also kind of maybe painful about some of those?
Yeah, so after I graduated, I landed a job at Citrix. Um, and my job was actually into a group which was doing reporting. So I got exposed to dealing with a lot of data, um, and doing reporting, both for like internal as well as external customers. And the most surprising thing was, coming out of college, you always, write like all these programs, which are more like you know, academic, and, coming to a company and understanding how the business work. It's like so much different writing programs there, right? Like you already have, you know, millions of lines of code. You have, specific set of, processes. You have all these different environments through which your code is moving, all the way to customers. There are all these different gates that you have to get your changes to move up to production. And it's just surprising that you don't learn about all these things when you are in academic setting, right? You write programs for fun, you do all these programs, and you try out things, and you're free to like use any libraries you want. You are free to use any programming languages you want. And it's a very different culture when you come into a big enterprise where there are set of processes and tooling and frameworks that you have to like adhere to, right? So that's like a big shift in how you think about writing um, your code, and thinking about all the rigor that goes through to make it available to your customers. So that was a big surprise and shift in how you do programming day in and day out.
Citrix GoToMeeting, was a business that has a lot of users, right? They've built big products that have scaled to millions of users. You probably saw some really interesting things, whether it was like leadership approaches and how managers worked on problems that may have been different from Bank of America to Sonos to Citrix. When you think about some of your now leadership approaches, how you approach leading technology teams, what are some of the things that you learned that you like loved, and then anything that without naming or shaming anyone, that you kind of have decided not to do?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question that, like helps me reflect on like, you know, uh, range of different companies that I've worked through my career. And I guess I'm, really fortunate to have exposed to like, small startups as well as, large enterprises like Citrix and Bank of America. So, working at like large companies like Bank of America and Citrix gave me like solid, foundation around thinking about like processes, scalability, security, especially with, the scale at which, the number of transactions that are coming through, for companies like Citrix and Bank of America, right? Understanding like how to minimize risk, building products which are gonna, scale and serve millions of users, and especially for like banking industry, thinking about like regulatory compliances and the security is paramount in environment like that. On the other hand, like working at Zight as well as Axiomad, which is more startup focused environment, understanding that agility is paramount to success there, making sure we are innovating faster, adapting to customer feedback and pivoting our approaches based on how the market is shifting or what our customers are needing, is important. So you don't have luxury of like spending months and months developing a product only to know that our customer wants something different, right?
How have you thought about the kind of the balance with respect to like maybe the needs of those, where you obviously are like, I want to build this incredible product that's scalable and reliable and secure, and then also you're sort of thinking about the short term needs, like you mentioned, bugs, feature tweaks and improvements. Like how do you kind of balance those? It seems like it would be pretty challenging.
Yeah, so I try to kind of blend both best of both the worlds, right? So thinking about technology and architecture in the same realm of how we think about product, right? So starting with, MVP for the product, making sure we're building, minimal viable product that our customers can use, and then we gain feedback and iterate on it, kind of applying same principles to our technology and architecture. So starting with, minimal viable architecture, which can be scaled for future needs as the product is growing and we are seeing usage, applying the same minimal viable point of view to the architecture as well. So start with something simple but making sure the architecture can be evolved with the need as we build the product. um, Take some calculated risk when it comes to like um, using off the shelf products or using third party libraries which are open source, and then balancing creativity with risk taking and some responsibility there. So
When you've been building some of these apps, whether it's at your larger scale or startup scale, have there been any kind of tough moments or scary stories where you're behind the scenes having to kind of like save the day with your team? You've had to stay up all night, fix things that shouldn't have been done as they were.
yeah, there are so many different stories. um, But yeah, let me talk about this story. When I was at Citrix, so I was leading the platform team, specifically the team that was, managing um, the surveys, which was core to our audio infrastructure. And one day we basically started getting all these alerts where none of our audio infrastructure was working. And back in that time, Citrix had its own data centers that it was managing. This was, pre-cloud era, so everything had to be managed by our operations team. We had 3 data centers in US. We were, managing everything, from, wiring all the way to like capacity and, all the things that go with that. Um, and we noticed that one of our core server, which manages the audio infrastructure, was having disk failure. So we had to dispatch a team member from operations team to go and replace the disk. Um, Fortunately, we had a spare disk on a spare server that we could swap out. Um, but it was like 20 minutes drive for him to get there, spend like maybe 20-30 minutes to do actual, swapping of the disk. Um, and, in and out, it was like 3 hours of disruption. And it was kind of crazy seeing all this, customer support tickets coming in, all everyone in the organization was kind of nervous because it's going to be a very long tail disruption. And customers not able to get on a call on an important meeting was a big thing. So in and all, it took 3 hours. Everything kind of went okay, but the plan was for that person to kind of go back again next day and replace that disk with a newer version because it was a spare disk. um, so so we went in again next day, and I don't know what the confusion was, but he ended up pulling the disk from a wrong server, which resulted in another disruption. And then another 3-4 hours was spent trying to figure out what happened there, because that person replaced the disk, went back home, only to recognize something wrong happened and having to come back again. So that was the funniest story on how things can go wrong with manual intervention. It's like all inadvertent, but things can happen when it comes to like managing infrastructure. So I'm so fortunate with how the cloud has come in, with AWS and Azure and GCP, how easy it is to, add more capacity when you need it, scale your servers vertically or horizontally as needed, and then being able to like replace disk or any other part of your infrastructure easily without, incurring big downtime. So
Yeah, the grandkids are not gonna, or maybe your kids will never really appreciate this. Like, what do you mean I have to change the server? Like, they'll just be working in a future environment where that concept doesn't exist. So
yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story. That's awesome. I'd love to know a little bit about your experience with what's become cool and important, and the industry. I'd say overall in technology has become more and more focused on AI. And working with you here at Zight, you've definitely shown a strong interest personally in building AI tools. I'd love to know a little bit about like what excites you most about the potential of AI, shaping the future of technology or current applications. Yeah, love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, like last 1 year has been so transformative in terms of like the potential of AI, right? It's fundamentally kind of reshaping how we think about like technology and business. Um, I think there is, so much happening at so fast pace. Sometimes it's like hard to like keep up with, all these different models which, keep coming every month with more and more, capabilities. But right now, the way kind of I am thinking about is the AI is helping basically reshaping some of the things that we do repetitively. So automating repetitive tasks. Second category is like efficiently, help us analyze larger data sets. Um, as a human, if you have to like look through large, data that's coming in, whether it's, a lot of events from your system, a lot of, data that you have accumulated around your user journey, it takes time from, a lot of engineers to build report and analyze it. And it has become like relatively easier to do that now with AI. And then third category is like personalization at scale, right? Like providing product recommendations which are specific to your use case, to your persona, is been like relatively easier, right? So when I kind of think about like automating repetitive task, I think about like support use case where, customer run into, you know, a, a problem, or if they have question, you find some patterns over time. It's like repetitive, right? They want to know about your, pricing. They want to know more about your, enterprise plan, or they want to know about certain features. And this repetitive task can be easily automated now, with some of the offering in support, realm. Um, Analyzing larger data set, I think, recently like Google released their, a new search offering. So I don't know if you have noticed, but like when you search now, instead of providing, top search results and links to those which were ranked before, now you basically get like summary from Google, which is, answering your question. So as a consumer, that saves me so much time because I don't have to like click on a website, go read and see if that's pertinent to my answer. I, get like short summary, which is across like, top 5 or 10 different, ranked links, and I get my answer right there. Right. And then personalization at scale, like, you can see a lot of this, at Amazon, like, as they understand, what I buy, how I buy it, when I need certain things ordered, they are able to kind of provide me some recommendation as soon as I go onto their website. So it's just, there's so much possibilities as, AI has been like innovating in, all these different areas. Right.
Yeah, I love that. Just thinking about your comment earlier about having to replace a server by hand, and how that's probably not something that many of us are going to continue to experience. When you think about Google search, you and I probably are experts at Google search. We know how to put the right syntax in to get the best results. And as I've used AI, particularly with ChatGPT or Google, it's basically now like, here is what we think is the best answer. And so it ends up saving me all this time. And again, my skill set of learning how to search and just kind of go through the muck of the internet. I'm excited to see a future where at least the answers that we get help save us time and are more personalized for me. So yeah, I think you're totally right, and I totally agree with you.
Yeah, even
Um,
like ChatGPT gives you, all the answers at your fingertips, right? All you need to learn is like, making sure you are, asking, the questions in the right way, and then you can like get all sorts of answers directly from ChatGPT.
Yeah, is there a kind of a personal favorite AI use? Whether it's like, I don't know, for example, like for lunch today, I I occasionally like to track my macros to make sure I'm eating the right things because I like have a sweet tooth. And so I took a picture of my lunch and I said, "Hey, ChatGPT, like based on this image, how many calories do you think I ate?" And like break it into my macros. And it answered, and I was like, "Whoa, this is crazy." Anything that you do that's fun or interesting or exciting for you or your family?
Um, on the personal front, I haven't really figured out kind of a use case which I would be using like day in and day out. Obviously, like use cases you mentioned, like taking a picture and then understanding what that product is. The other day, like we were, kids and I were like walking through the neighborhood, and we saw like a kid, using some handheld device, and kids were interested in that. And like we took a picture and then, came back home and then, used, the Google Gemini search to, figure out what that product was. Um, but, I haven't found like a repeated use of something like that in my, day-to-day personal side. But obviously on the professional side, I use, ChatGPT a lot, whether it's like, uh, preparing some internal communication or even external communication, making sure it's like professional looking. So, just like jot down my thoughts, and like ChatGPT would become like my personal assistant and give me a good draft of how, that email or that documentation should look like. I'm also using that for like refining product requirement documents or technical design documents, or get some input on, what I might be missing, on those documents before I share with the team. So a lot of cool use cases there.
You've talked a little bit about AI and how it's transformative for customers, and also for some of the personal ways that you work. Have you seen any interesting impacts to how you approach managing or seeing how your engineering teams work and develop software? And like maybe what have they helped you do that might have been different than last year?
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of kind of LLM models, which are now also helping with like code generation, it has become so easy to like do, POCs where, you have certain ideas and you want to, um, quickly, create a prototype, and using, what GitHub Copilot has to offer, even ChatGPT, you can like describe in few, terms what you're looking for, and then, get some, initial code that you can start with, right? You know, Being able to also use Copilot to, help you write better code, help you write some tests. So it's basically helping the whole engineering team save so much time. Similarly, on like product side, being able to, um, get a product requirement document, or take all this, user feedback and get a good summary of, what our users were thinking last 1 week, using our product, and getting that summary of like what are the challenges or what are the things they loved. It has become so easy to do that.
Like looking at maybe like implementing AI with Zight, for example. We've brought in some third party company products that have helped us leverage AI. And to your point earlier, there's new models all the time. So like keeping up with the models is really complex. It can be pretty hard. It's almost like a full time job. Like, oh, new model drop, new model drop, new model drop, and then depending on the company that's bringing those models out, you got to have this sort of eye there. What have you seen so far around maybe like some, I think larger companies, maybe big enterprises, they're sort of thinking about implementing AI. What do you feel like are some of the misconceptions about implementing it that maybe would surprise them if you said, actually, it's not that hard or it's not that complicated, and here are some of the reasons why.
Yeah, so I think like, really, training the AI to a specific, vertical or use cases, it relies on like, good data, right? So data quality and having that larger data set is essential, to have, good AI models, right? And having that kind of like high quality data and, structured data that you need is something a lot of, bigger organizations can do easily because they have access to that kind of data. But a lot of companies can underestimate time it takes to, create such data set, right? Like, you know, look at all the data you have, clean them up, structure in certain way that it makes it effective for the AI model to consume and learn from it. If it's not like properties structured, or if it's not relevant, then it results in like a lot of unreliable or biased results. sometimes also leading to like, what we call hallucination on AI, right? Where you ask a question and then you get like totally unrelated response, from the AI, right? The other thing is just like being cautious about like the ethical and compliance concerns as well, right? Like we are still in this phase of, you know, I would say like early AI usage where we are starting to think about like, ethical and, impact to our users, but we haven't like really thought about like all the safeguards that we need to build around that, right? We have seen already uh, misuses where somebody is taking picture of some celebrity and using it for political reasons, or somebody is like dubbing somebody else's voice and sharing it without their consent, and that has been like challenged with AI. And it has become so incredibly easily to do all this thing that not having those safeguards in place would become really challenging, as we see more and more advanced AI models come through.
Yeah, it sort of feels like I don't know if you've seen this, but I love going to national parks. And for a while, you saw nearly infinite selfie sticks and drones everywhere. And it was a cool new, it's specifically, especially with like the drones, they can go everywhere, they can capture everything. But when there's like 10 or 20 of them in the sky, it's horrible, and it causes a decrease or a quality decrease for your customer, for the folks who are using the product. So yeah, I mean, I think also just on a personal level, I see more and more people worrying about their parents, getting scammed, and families needing to have code words to make sure that like mom doesn't wire some scammer $10,000. So there's
Yeah.
there's definitely some challenges, and like you said, there's lots of opportunities.
Yeah, voice
Uh,
cloning. Yeah, I mean, we have already seen people, this exploited in the wild where somebody is, asking them to wire, leaving a voicemail as their relative, and then, abusing AI for use cases like that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have two more questions for you, Sajin. My kind of final two questions are just around leadership and some of your team dynamics that you've built over the years. So I think like one of them would be more a reflection on your career, kind of looking back. So you started off as early on with Citrix and Sonos. You were an individual contributor. You eventually became a manager, VP, CTO now. When you look back and you kind of think about what would have made this easier, or what should I have been thinking about doing the entire time? Like, what advice would you give to those early, young, aspiring folks who want to be you now?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost thing, I think as a CTO, you definitely want to make sure you've mastered the fundamentals of, software development, understanding, technology, software architecture, scalability, is paramount to being in this role, because that will help you make good strategic decision, as you grow in your career, and also being able to influence, decision making, when it comes to like technology side of house, right? I would say the second biggest thing, which, as an engineer, you don't really spend time, is understanding the business, right? So making sure you understand the business, what is important for the users, what is important for the business, where we are generating revenue, where are, uh, what are the areas where customers are requesting something more, and um, helping bridge that gap when it comes to finding technology solutions and then pairing that with like the business needs, right? And then obviously being, just like not CTO but being a leader, um, you need to be able to have strong communication skills, whether it's like verbal, or written, and being able to effectively communicate to both like technical stakeholders as well as non-technical stakeholders is important. And you would be doing that day in and day out, yet, as you kind of grow in your career ladder, right? And lastly, I would say like, making sure you build, um, you know, good, strong teams, empower your teams to, take, good decisions, try to push, as much you can with your team because they are the work, the work pros on the ground. They understand what's happening, you know, at the code base level, at the technology level, and, empowering them to like being able to make those decisions is important.
Yes, I 100% agree. Those are great thoughts. You mentioned, thinking about the building a great team and ensuring that the folks who are doing a lot of the work, I think both in leadership and when you're an individual contributor, you kind of look up and look down at each other and sort of like you wonder what each other does sometimes. And I think in a remote engineering culture like we have here at Zight, sometimes it can be hard to communicate or understand or see what is important. Like you mentioned, the business logic behind some of the feature requests or bugs that we fix or improve. How have you found building a engineering culture, whether it's in person or remote? What are some of the main principles that you think about?
Yeah, I think fostering open communication is important, especially in remote setting because you don't have somebody sitting next to you where you can just like talk and easily connect and bounce ideas. Thankfully, we have tools like Zight and Slack and Confluence, which make easy for you to do asynchronous communication. And I seldomly, you'll hear from my team members, I seldomly tell them like, hey, don't come to me, ask this question on a team setting, because if I communicate something to you, which might be also important for others to learn, then this communication would be lost because it's just between me and you. So I promote, asking questions in a team setting. Sometimes, it's kind of daunting, for somebody like a junior engineer to do that when there are like 20 people on a Slack channel. But I think it becomes easy as they kind of, try to do that more and more often. But those are kind of the ways we can increase um, communication across the team, build that community knowledge throughout the whole team, and then focusing on the outcomes and not trying to kind of micromanage the team. Making sure I communicate about what are goals for this quarter, making sure everyone in the engineering is aware what we are trying to do, and if there are timelines, making sure we're working towards same timeline across the board. And then, as I said, like empowering the team to make certain decisions so that we can move along through our product roadmap as needed, and celebrating the wins, making sure. And when I came into Zight, I already saw there like all these channels already in place where we celebrate, across
Maybe too
different.
many channels. Too many channels.
I think that's a good problem to have in a way. But yeah, celebrating, even smaller wins, whether it's on support, engineering, sales, making sure we do some high fives and celebrate those wins as an organization. And I think the most important being remote is to be over communicating, right? Um, Especially all the remote teams with different time zones across the globe, everyone working their own time zones. It really becomes difficult to make sure everyone is on same page. So using Zeit to record videos, sharing the updates frequently, and making sure I do frequent one-on-ones and keep iterating our goals, messaging timelines, and making sure everyone is on same page.
I love it. I think if you were ChatGPT and you heard what you just said, I think it would be like 7 ways to say make sure you communicate and document and celebrate. I can think about a number of times where I've had messages from my team members who are new, and I've said, hey, you ask me as many questions as you want. I have no problems with it. I want you to not feel any embarrassment or discouragement about asking the stupidest question possible. And they'll message me and they'll message me and they'll message me. And I love what you said there, which was sort of bringing the questions out into the group, because it helps them get more comfortable asking other team members. It helps them feel more comfortable with communicating more broadly. And I think Sergey Brin, the former president of Alphabet, Google, he talked about over the last few years, specifically with their Google AI products, where he felt like Google needed to get back to feeling uncomfortable and embarrassed more often. And they have been embarrassed, they have been uncomfortable, and they've had to compete again. And so I think a lot of when you're working with a remote team, you have to be okay with the communication, the over communication, that embarrassment or that discomfort. Obviously, you and I need to make sure they're not feeling too embarrassed. But anyway, those are really some really great thoughts.
Yeah, and I also want to make sure I get challenged too, because I probably am not the smartest person in the company, so it's good to like always hear something where I get challenged or have somebody come in with a different opinion, and being able to like take a step back. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That might be a good way to go forward as well, right? So trying to bring this into a group setting kind of fosters all that, seeing that a CTO is getting challenged, which is a good thing, and then taking that positively. So
And Sachin does get challenged, and he handles it excellently. And I think that's one of the things that I've liked working with him so much about. Well, Sachin, thanks again for joining us today. Really appreciate having you here.
thank you so much, Scott. This was a really good episode, and thanks for having me again. So.
All right, man. Talk to you later.